Hi, so thank you all for coming. Welcome to our second public input session for the fiscal year 2025, program year 2024 annual action plan. We're going to go through a couple of different slides, talk a little bit about the programs, eligible activities, and then we want to hear from you on the types of projects that that you'd like to see the city fund in this next annual action plan. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. There'll be opportunities for everybody to contribute as we get into the different funding sources. If you're participating through one of the city's social media channels, please feel free to go ahead and put comments or questions, your ideas into there. We will be checking those. Those responses will get sent to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. In addition to that, this is not your only opportunity. We've got a slide later that's going to tell you about the other district meetings. But more than that, after we have these meetings, we're going to draft a plan. There'll be additional chances to make comments on those plans. But before we go very further, I want to recognize Councilman Jim Klein, at-large councilman, who's here to join us, and we always appreciate his attendance and his contributions. We also have the Director of Planning and Community Development, Daniel McGinn, and the Grant Monitoring Program Manager, Leticia Canmore. And again, I'm Jennifer Buxton. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to go over an overview of the annual action plan planning process. We're going to discuss the plan priorities, discuss the use of funds. We're going to go over the funding basics, and we're going to tell you how you can put input and give more input on the annual action plan, community development, housing, and homeless needs of the community. So what are we even doing? So because the city receives these funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are required every 5 years to put together a consolidated plan. After that, for the next 4 years, we're required to update that with an annual action plan. The 5-year plan contains a few more things than the annual plan. It's a little deeper dive into some of the data. The annual plan is more of that year's strategies, which projects we're going to put funds into, those types of things. So this year is year 2 of the 5-year con plan, if you're keeping track of where we are. So in the 5-year consolidated plan, we set the priorities for those 5 years. Different projects fall under different categories, but here are the the priorities that were set for the next 5 years. They include increase and maintain affordable housing, which includes housing repair and rehabilitation, home buyer and home builder programs, tenant-based rental assistance, the creation of affordable rental housing, new construction and rehabilitation, public facility and infrastructure improvements that can include parks and recreation, youth centers, neighborhood facilities, accessibility improvements, curb sidewalk improvements, for blight removal, that could include code enforcement activities, addressing homelessness, support homeless efforts, emergency shelter operational support, creation and maintenance of affordable rental housing, new construction and rehabilitation, rapid rehousing. Under public services, homeless supportive services, senior services, and job training and employment skills. And then the programs also come with administrative and planning options. So what does the process this year look like? We're here. This week we did 2. This is our second community input session. Next week we're doing 3. We're doing 1 in each district, but you can go to any of the meetings that you choose. You don't have to only go to the one in your district. We're going to release a notice of funding availability on April 1, 2024. We're going to take the input that we gather from these sessions, and it's going to help us formulate what should be in that NOFA, what types of projects should we be asking for. There'll be a technical assistance workshop on April 4th. We're going to put out the draft plan for public comment in June of 2024. We're going to present our recommendations to council in July 2024, and we're required to submit to HUD in August of 2024. So HUD has not released our budget for the fiscal year 2025. We usually get a little bit of variance from year to year. So these are last year's numbers. With the Community Development Block Grant Funds, we received about $2.7 million. In the Home Investment Partnerships Program funds, we received 1.4. And in the Emergency Solutions Grant, we received $236,000. These will not be the exact figures. They will vary from anywhere from $100,000 in the CDBG or the home program to a couple of $1,000s. We'll see what happens when HUD releases their budget. These dollar amounts are based on different things like funding, it's a formula allocation, population size, housing need data, homelessness data, those things. So a little bit about the CDBG program. There are different eligible activities under CDBG. They include housing rehabilitation, home ownership assistance, public facilities and improvements, blight removal, demolition, site preparation, code enforcement, economic development, acquisition, disposition of real property, and public services. We're just trying to kind of set a framework for the question that's coming up. One thing that all CDBG projects have to do is meet what's called a national objective. There are 3 national objectives for the Community Development Block Grant Program. 1, you can benefit low and moderate income persons, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. 2, you can prevent or eliminate blight. Or 3, you can meet the urgent needs when health and welfare are threatened. We're not really talking about urgent need. Urgent need refers to kind of a catastrophic event. If we were to experience a hurricane or an earthquake, that would be considered an urgent need under this program. So we're really talking about preventing or eliminating blight and benefiting low and moderate income persons. To talk a little bit about benefiting low and moderate income persons, CDBG, we can meet that 2 different ways. You can help through a program a person that is low income. We have helped that person repair their house. That is an individual benefit. CDBG also allows you to have an area benefit. So if you have a public facility or a park where the area is over 51% or more low income, you can put that, you can assist that park because that park has an area benefit. Is that clear as much to everybody? Does everybody kind of understand? Okay, so when we're talking about serving low-income people, you can do it through an individual benefit or an area benefit. So where can we put CDBG funds with an area benefit? Well, this is some of the city's census tracts. Inside those census tracts, you can see these green boxes, right? Those are called low to moderate income block groups. Those block groups qualify as CDBG eligible areas. And I'm noticing that most of the area that we're in has been cut off in this map. We'll see if we can, if anybody's really interested, we'll stay a couple minutes afterwards and we'll bring up the real map and we'll kind of look at it. But for the majority of the city, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. In concept, is everybody with me? Okay, so if it's in the green area, chances are that block grant will qualify under low to moderate income area benefit. Okay, the reason why I'm hounding on this is because when we're talking about libraries, parks, senior centers, those things have to qualify under area benefit. Okay, so what we want to know is what priority projects would you like to see with CDBG funds? Going back to the 5-year priority list, of those, these are the things that we can consider under the Community Development Block Grant eligibility list. So again, they include increasing and maintaining affordable housing, public facilities, which is again, parks and recreation, youth centers, neighborhood facilities, accessibility, curb sidewalk improvements, code enforcement, blight removal, addressing homelessness, support homeless efforts, emergency shelter operational support, the creation and maintenance of affordable rental housing, new construction and rehabilitation, rapid rehousing programs, public services in terms of homeless supportive services, senior services, job training, and employment skills. And then, of course, there's administration and planning services. For those of you that may be participating on our social media channels, please feel free to put an idea in the chat, in the comment section. If you're on YouTube, I think you do it in the comments as well. Or again, jot your question down or your comment, and we're going to have some email addresses at the end, and you are more than welcome to send us those emails. So is there anybody that wants to start with an idea that they would have for a community, a CDBG project that would fall under these priorities that you would like to see the city fund? What kinds of ideas do we have? Do you have children that play in a particular park or go to a particular, you have family members at a senior center? So for example, let's talk a little bit about previous projects funded. Salinas Park Splash Pad, Salinas Park Play for All, the new trail and some lighting and some exercise equipment. I wish we had done the new sensory room at La Retama Library. Very excited about that. But I believe we got in on some broadband things at the La Retama Library. This one's incredibly boring, but very important. CDBG funds have been used to put a generator on the central kitchen at Del Mar. That is the kitchen where the Meals for Wheels meals are prepared. So if we have an extreme weather event, that place still runs and we can continue to feed seniors. Those types of things. That was considered a public facility improvement. Is there anything anybody would like to add? Shoot it at us. We don't have to vet the project tonight or approve it. What do you have? Anybody? Okay, if you think of something as we go along, we'll come back to it. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, that's me. I have to go to the next slide. So the Home Investment Partnerships Program. Major difference between home and CDBG, Community Development Block Grant can fund a wide range of activities. The Home Investment Partnerships Program can fund one activity, housing. That's the only thing that home can do. It is called the Home Program, so we can kind of keep them straight. Home can fund housing rehabilitation, home ownership assistance. Hi, look what I did. Does anybody know how to fix what I did? Anybody? Dan? Is it touch? My apologies. Okay, keep going. A couple more. Stop. Thank you. Okay, that didn't happen. Let's move forward. So the Home Investment Partnership can fund housing rehabilitation, home ownership assistance, new construction of affordable housing, tenant-based rental assistance. So if we take our priority list and break it out into what the home program can fund, these are the types of projects that are possible. Housing repair and rehabilitation, home buyer and home builder programs, tenant-based rental assistance, the creation of affordable rental housing, new construction and rehabilitation. That activity also follows or falls under the possibility of addressing homelessness, the creation and maintenance of affordable rental housing, new construction and rehabilitation, and then administration and planning. So my question is, what priority projects would you like to see with home funds? Think about the types of housing that are needed in your neighborhood. For example, recent funding or recent projects that we have done is almost annually we fund a single-family rehabilitation project where folks living in really substandard homes where the house is more than 51% deteriorated. And we are talking about, I have seen bathroom water systems with the hose through the window. We're talking about some pretty substandard conditions, right? That home can be demolished and it can be rebuilt. If it's cost effective, we can do a substantial rehabilitation program on it. That's usually limited to people of incredibly low incomes. They might be seniors, disabled, or veterans. So that's one of the things that we do under housing repair and rehabilitation. The home program has also recently funded, have you seen the Palms at Blucher at Karankawa and, somebody help me, Tonkawa? Okay. Between those two streets, that project going up, that has Home Investment Partnership Program funds in it to subsidize that. So it brings down the cost of the rents. There's those. Tenant-based rental assistance, there's a group in town that assists persons with disabilities. So tenant-based rental assistance goes into that and it helps subsidize their rent for a period of 2 years while they get assistance. Those types of things. Is anybody coming up with anything? Is anything triggering in your head? Go ahead, Marty, or Eli, which one? Head.
So my question is on the create affordable rental housing. That is something that in my uptown area of Corpus Christi is very desperately needed. There were some low-income housing that were closed down in that area because of some blight ordinances that were passed recently. I'm talking about the ones on Park Street going towards South Staples. There was at least, I would say, anywhere from 35 to maybe 75 people living in these two, I guess, affordable housing. They're like efficiencies there.
Okay.
They were closed down because they were substandard buildings. I guess I have two questions. Like, this is going to be, like, I'm assuming that those properties are privately owned. They're not government owned. They're privately owned. So what stops property owners from raising the rent? They get the money from you guys. They have a nice affordable housing, and maybe the first 6 months it's affordable, but then it goes up for $500, and those same people that we poured this money into are back, roaming the streets. So how would that work, prevention of that?
So even if a private developer, not necessarily a nonprofit, but a for-profit private developer received home funds, onto that property goes a restrictive covenant or a lien of some kind. And in it, depending on the amount of money that was either granted or loaned to them, there's a period of time where they are forced to have affordable rents and forced to limit the incomes that they serve. So the contract, for example, may say you have to serve 10 people whose income is at 50% of the area median income, and you can only charge a rent that is so high. And those limits are dictated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it has to be for a period of time. And then our department goes out every year, Leticia, and monitors and pulls tenant files and finds out how did they income qualify that tenant and what rent are they charging them. So there's that process, and that happens every year for the length of the affordability period. The smaller the dollar amount, the fewer years on the affordability period. There are some things that trigger long. These projects that are brand new apartment complexes, those are 20 years that we have to monitor that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So with that was a question. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to put one back on you. What idea do you have? What project would you like to see that ties to that we should consider? What type of project do you think would address the situation you're discussing?
I think getting with some, and it's like two birds with one stone, where there's several blights, abandoned buildings, abandoned homes that are in that uptown area where there is a high population of low income to no income individuals. I think you could either work with the property owner, buy the property, whatever it takes, and instead of, starting new from scratch, this is already an area that people expect there to be lower rent, to have more low-income rent in that area. So I guess working with what we have and working with why is this now an abandoned property. There's several apartments there that started, like I can distinctly remember the one that's right off of Agnes. They were rehabilitating it. It's like the corner of Agnes and King Street.
Okay.
And they put in new windows. They started painting it. That was like 5 years ago. Okay. And now it's become a blight. They can't even keep up with the grass. Code enforcement is constantly having issues. Yeah. And it's frustrating because these are empty buildings. They look nice. They were really rough before, and they look nice now. And it's just, now the windows are getting smashed out. Grass is high. There's now criminal mischief, hanging out there. So I guess putting pressure on what we have here, we do have a lot of things that we could easily, I think, turn around, but I don't know what is stopping these individuals. I don't know if it's code or money or what it is, but I think we need to connect with these people that have this property and either put up or shut up,
Okay. So what I'm hearing is possibly rental rehabilitation loans to private property owners or a purchase rehabilitation program under a different owner. Yes. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Uptown, downtown, got it.
Yes, ma'am.
Hang on, Dan's,
One kind of, so are these buildings mostly of the like 4 unit to maybe 20 unit smaller scale?
They're smaller scale, definitely not more than 20. I mean, the one on Park Street probably held maybe a little bit more than that, but not more than 50 at each unit. There are two right next to each other. It had been a really good source of low income for the individuals there. And then I think they closed it, what, 2 years ago, something like that? The one on Park Street, the one that, it's been 2 years. They just, and from what I was hearing from the property owner, they said, you know, the city's coming down on us. This is substandard, and you guys got to get out of here. And I totally understand that we don't want people living in substandard places, but now we have less places to go to, and the competition for the limited affordable housing is much, much higher.
it's very steep. Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Is there, go ahead. You can add whatever you want.
I think that a lot of the buildings that Marty mentioned that are derelict shouldn't necessarily be rehabilitated, but just taken out or demolished, I guess
Okay.
is what I'm trying to say. And I would really encourage the city to look at options for like where you could fit more homes in a smaller, I guess I'm trying to say like tiny homes or more sustainable options that would fit more people in one location,
Right.
because, you know, I think that it would even look really cool and add to the neighborhood to have something different. Again, it may be like building codes and things like that, but
Okay.
I think small residences are great for people who are transitioning from being unhoused to housed. And nobody wants to clean a big house or
No.
a big apartment.
Right.
So.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Anybody else? Jim gets final say, man.
So, I'll go in kind of a different direction, and I think we have to talk about different pools of money, but it's my understanding, thank you. It's my understanding that there's, with regard to projects that are designed to improve existing home structures. So for an elderly person, creating a ramp or widening a door, for instance, that a wheelchair can get through it, that the wait list for that is years long. Could these kinds of money be devoted toward that to help shorten that wait list?
Yes, two things. One of the programs is funded under, and this is for technical reasons, the minor home repair program is funded under the Community Development Block Grant Program. The substantial rehabilitation, where we're tearing down the house and rebuilding it, that's funded under the home program due to rules. The CDBG funded minor home repair program, we're a year away from being done with that waiting list.
Oh, from working through it, and getting whittled down.
It has been getting whittled down from hundreds. We're about a year away from being able to start accepting applications again. Okay, when that happens, we're probably gonna have to make some policy decisions about, okay, the need here is really great. How do we even further? I mean, do we further limit the incomes? Do we further limit geography? What do we do to really get those funds to the people who need it? Because the need is so great. And nobody benefits from a really long waiting list.
Right.
So the minor home repair program, we're so close. The substantial rehabilitation program, which is funded out of the home program, that waiting list is in excess of 20 years. Yeah. Yeah. And we fund, I want to say in the last couple of years, $700,000 or $800,000. But please remember that the home budget was what? $1.6 million. Okay? So we want substantial rehabilitation. We want rental units with affordable rents. Okay, well, we're out of money. That's it. Ta-da! So those are the things we have to consider. Because we both have to house people in a place that they can afford, that is safe, and we can't have the folks living in houses where their plumbing is a garden hose coming through their window. Neither one of those options is acceptable. So, yeah, but here we go. Okay, so let's talk about the Emergency Solutions Grant basics. This is the ESG program. ESG is only for serving those who are homeless. Eligible components in ESG, they're called components. If you want to get really technical, you all have really good ESG knowledge now. Street outreach, homeless prevention, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing is a really cool program where if somebody has lost their job, but they've gotten another one, but they're not going to get a paycheck for 6 months. So they've been not 6 months, 6 weeks. So they've been evicted. They're homeless for this amount of time. Rapid rehousing can get them into another unit, help get them moved, and they're only homeless for this much time. It's a really effective program. Salvation Army runs one. I think they have over like a 90% success rate. It's a really good program. Also, a comment about homeless prevention. The easiest way to help a homeless person is to prevent it in the front. That's where we're talking about affordable housing, rental assistance, utility assistance, whatever has to happen to keep them in that home. In addition, we have HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. It is a federally mandated data system. Anybody who uses these funds has to enter information into the HMIS system. And then there's administrative activities. So going into, remember, our long priority list, taking from the long priority list the items that are eligible to address with ESG funds are only addressing homelessness. They include support homeless efforts, homeless prevention, street outreach, emergency shelter operational support, rapid rehousing program, and some administrative and planning. So I'm going to ask the same question. What projects would you like to see funded with ESG funds?
I guess I'll start. You're gonna go first.
Eli.
So I just want to point out that it's really hard to answer that question because $200,000 is
Okay.
very small amount, right? We all know how little you can do with that amount of money for our unhoused folks. So that being said, I don't know how to raise that number. If there's a way to like get them to fund more in the ESG, that would be a good start. Just
Okay, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm just going to give you a piece of information. The ESG funds are allocated to communities based on a formula allocation. We get what we get.
right.
Yeah.
And I assume it has to do with like the pit count and things like that.
Population, there are numbers that go into that. There's a formula. The number gets kicked out. We get what we get.
I get it, and I completely understand, and so I think that with the funds that you are allotted, the best way to address homelessness is to establish a no-barrier shelter, which I know would cost a heck of a lot more than $200,000. But I believe that having a location that has no barriers, meaning they don't have to have an ID, they don't have to be separated from their animals, those are the barriers I'm talking about. Having a location where people can just be without harassment, without fear of being in danger, where they could take a shower, they could use a restroom, maybe launder their clothes, things like that, would be a game changer for a lot of folks who are living on the streets. And so I said it last year at these meetings that we should identify a location for a no-barrier shelter in the uptown area where it's close to resources that are already there, like Mother Teresa's and Metro Ministries. We know they're all doing as much as they can, Salvation, but there's just the need is greater than the capacities of all of the organizations that are already established. So no barrier shelter location, I think, would be a great start.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a couple follow-up questions. So this low barrier shelter, no barrier shelter, low barrier shelter, whichever terminology you're using, as you picture it, what does it look like? Is it a physical building or is it an open space? Is it congregate, meaning a dorm room, or is it individual? Behind closed doors? Is it, are there kitchen facilities? Tell me a little bit about what you think this looks like.
Yeah, I think that it could start out just being an empty lot because most people that we're talking about in this demographic are already living on the street as it is. Having a place that has a fence, around it so that it is secure. Having a place that has restrooms 24 hours a day. And I understand, staffing and things like that may be an issue, security may be an issue, but I think that it could start out very minimal and not necessarily even have to be a building. But it would all depend on, what there is to offer. I know there's a lot of vacant city properties, vacant lots that are just not being used at all. And so my thought is, why can't people just be there? Does that answer the question?
No, I'm just, this is the opportunity for us to provide input into these questions. So that you provide us with information, we're gonna go back and we're gonna see what we can, if we can,
Well, I think that
what we can get included into the plan. So
Yeah.
just, we wanna know what's in your heads,
Yeah.
right?
I think that having a building would be great, but it's not necessary. And even this location could be used in inclement weather, if we're gonna have a freeze or something like that, it would be a heck of a lot easier to get heaters and tents and things like that to people who are out in the elements if we know where to go. All of the organizations could come together. And I think that it would be a really beautiful thing because they're all stretched very thin, but when you're able to work alongside each other, you can kind of have solidarity and just together make things better.
Okay, thank you. Marty, did you have questions? Did you want to add?
Yeah, a good example of something like what Eli was talking about that's actually in action is up in Austin, Camp Esperanza. They work in conjunction with something similar to what you were talking about in the first couple of slides, the Community First Village. How Camp Esperanza started was Greg Abbott, during the camping rescindment, was getting frustrated with having homeless people hanging around the Capitol. Out of frustration, he was like, I am going to sanction this TxDOT property here. It's this abandoned piece, 7 acres of asphalt. Y'all can go there. We won't mess with you. Just go over there. And there was no planning, lack of resources out there. So it was pretty bad at first. Then the Other Ones Foundation too stepped forward and was like, we can't allow people to live here with no electricity, without sanitation, without support, and they descended out there, and it is a beautiful thing. They have now progressed from just having people outside in these almost like campground lots is how it worked. They are now moving to the click-apart structures, and they're housing the most vulnerable populations like the seniors, people with medical issues, people who need to be housed. Eventually, no one will be outside unless they choose to elect to be in that situation. But still, they're able to go to this camp. There's restrooms, there's sanitation, there's electricity, and the service providers are there on site. They have their own case managers, and they work through the system with the individuals so that, hey, you'd be a good fit for this organization. You'd be a good fit for that. We're going to get you housing here, here, here. But if you don't qualify for these resources because of whatever reason, we will get you into Community First Village. Their number one goal is to, of course, house these individuals. So I think if we had a outdoor transitional shelter here, it would be easier to get the houseless community to want to participate. And on what I'd like to see, because, echoing what Eli said, 200,000 when we're talking about poverty reduction is really nothing. I think that the 200,000 should be spent solely on street outreach so that we can foster better relationships with people out there. When people trust you, I've been doing this since 2020. People trust me if I tell them, go to La Bretama, they're doing the ID recovery, the document, they're going. I'm going with them. It's a wonderful program they have at La Bretama. I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for the Connex that's there because it gives me some footing to say, please trust me. I know that you've been burned by the city, you've been burned by so many people, but trust me on this. They're going to help you. And me just saying that and having that already relationship with them, people are now participating in it. So I feel like if we spent that $200K on street outreach, I think it would definitely pay off in the future for us.
Okay, you. Can I come back to what you said about the village? I'm hearing Uptown. So the idea that you have that's being modeled off of Austin, where do you think that's located?
So the Camp Esperanza.
No, I mean, where do you
Oh, the
think?
Community First Village.
I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, okay.
You're
So-
bringing up this project, so I'm going to
Yes.
ask a follow-up question.
So
Where do you think it's located here if we were to do some sort of project?
Actually, I came across a city-owned property while doing the pit count. It's right across from that church. It's where the police department used to be located, I believe at. That means that there's infrastructure already underneath, so we're not gonna, shell out so much money. Geographically, it's at a slant, so less threat of flooding, things like that. There are some concrete structures there. I'm not too sure what's underneath them. Maybe they can be expanded, so. But then, the other side of the coin, oh, I don't want that in my neighborhood. And
Yeah.
we've really been giving Hillcrest the short end of the stick. But a way to go about that is we're going to have all these people in one spot. We should turn and look at developers and try to incentivize them. I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, but they have a lot of working capital. Hey, if we give you like a hookup, can you build a McDonald's here? And in turn, in Hillcrest, there's nowhere to eat, there's nowhere to shop. That's how you're going to offset for the community. Say, we're going to make this as aesthetically pleasing as possible. Let's put a really nice fence up so you're not having to see necessarily what's going on in there. Let's plant some really nice trees. And since we're doing this, and the Hillcrest community is already experiencing all the homelessness issues that is happening out there, they're already adjusted to it. Me living in Uptown, and I'm used to seeing houseless individuals walking around, but if I had a grocery store nearby in Uptown, or a grocery store, or some small little bodega in Hillcrest, I'm like, cool, I don't have to go across the bridge to do this. So I would do the low barrier there in Hillcrest, and then when we address like affordable housing, like what Community First Village does, that is something that could be brought more into the central city, because those individuals are in a different point in their life. They can navigate bus, maybe they even got a car, that'd be awesome. But those individuals have already participated through the programs. They've gone through substance abuse, ID recovery, have had MHID support them. So those individuals, I think, can stand to be a little bit farther away from the resources, but people who are in the low barrier need to stay somewhere here. So I think the Community First Village, I've seen it myself, it's beautiful. So, I think it could even be put somewhere like in the town and country area. I think the biggest thing on that is making sure that we select an area for future growth. We don't want to stick somewhere where like, dang, I didn't realize we're going to stick 100 people
Right.
here, so picking that one's going to be a little bit harder. I think sitting down with developers, code enforcement, and talking to people who really do understand the infrastructure underneath could help us point us in the right direction for that affordable housing.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a community input session. We are on your time.
I do like the location Marty mentioned that's on like Sam Rankin and Lobo and Winnebago. It's a very large lot that the city already owns. But there's also other locations. There's locations off of like Port and Agnes that would be great, that has like a warehouse. There's another one just down Port that has a big warehouse. It says Lord on it. It's there for sale also.
Know that one, okay?
But there's tons of locations we could talk about offline another time. I have plenty of other ideas,
Okay.
depending on the size and the scope.
Okay, all right. Is there anybody else that is having any thoughts about potential projects for ESG? Okay, before we cancel, or before we close this out a little bit, I'm gonna go back to the CDBG funds. Remember, that was that wider group. Then there's the home funds, that's housing only, and ESG, that's homelessness. If anything has triggered and anybody wants to go back? Sorry, I don't want to take the mic every time. You're fine, you're fine. This is such a crowded room. We're glad to have you, so please contribute.
So those were I don't have this slide, but it was
Which one?
the CBDG funds and how they can be
Community
spent.
Development Block Grant.
Yes.
blight removal.
Yeah, okay.
This one.
So I recently read a book, and it's called Palaces for the People. It's a really great book. Anyone in city planning should read it. It basically talks about, how blighted areas increase crime, broken windows, overgrown weeds, things like that. So I think that neighborhood facilities like community centers and things like that would really be good in areas that may be overgrown or blighted. So taking a blighted area and turning it into a community center or an area where youth could play sports or, I think that would be a really great way to use those funds.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add there? Okay. Let me get back to where I was. No, it's great. It's fantastic. Okay, so tonight is not the only option, right? Last night, we were in District 3. Tonight, we're in District 1, and you are not limited to your own districts. District 2, we're going to be there on Monday, the 4th, at the Ben F. McDonald Public Library. All of these meetings are from 6 to 7 p.m. District 4, we're going to take care of that on Wednesday of next week. We'll be at the Hart Library over on Waldron, also from 6 to 7. And District 5 is on, the 7th is a Thursday, at the Garcia Public Library on Brockhampton, also from 6 to 7. Okay, so those are these meetings, but that's not your only option. Remember, from these meetings, we're going to go and we're going to develop a draft annual action plan. That draft will go out for public comment. It's usually out for public comment for 30 days. That will be in June. And then in July, we're going to present our recommendations to council. There's another opportunity to provide comment. So I don't want you to think tonight wasn't it. Next slide or two, I'm going to show you some email addresses. You don't have to be at one of those meetings. You do not have to go to the June public comment period. If you send us an email, we're still going to include it. We're still going to consider it, right? So there's a lot of opportunities. If you go home and in the shower tomorrow morning, I had the best idea ever, shoot it over to us. So any question on input or needs? Okay. Here are some contact information. I'm Jennifer. Dan is the director. Leticia is grant monitoring, and unfortunately Nora Vargas can't be here with us tonight, but here are our email addresses. Contact us as you so choose. I want to thank you all very much for your attendance and your ideas and your contributions. I want to thank those who are watching or participating on our channels. We will check for comments. Those comments do get saved, memorialized, and submitted to HUD, so do know that we take that seriously. And again, I want to thank you. If you have any questions, let us know. For anybody that would like to stay, we can bring up the low-income block group map for community development block grant. I don't know that we have to keep that going for Facebook, though. I think we can, if somebody has a question, we can get people to referred. But if anybody wants to stay as we go offline and in the meeting, you're more than welcome to, while we see if I can navigate to that map. Thank you all very much for your participation. Greatly appreciate it. Let us know if you have any questions, and have a good night.